Recording.
Welcome back to Bricks, Bonds, and Safety. I'm your host, Owen McDonald here. I have a few guests here today. We got Caden Collymore, Dr. Christina Klyronimus, and Dr. Jonathan Hipkiss, all from the Department of Criminology, experts on social housing and crime. Today, they're going to give us a new take on social housing. How are we feeling today, guys?
Good.
Not bad.
Good to be here.
Yeah, pretty
How
good.
are you?
Good. I'm not too bad. It's good to have you guys here, obviously.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we'll just get started. I think the first thing we're going to talk about is, I think a good way to start it off, just what kind of got you guys into social housing, what interests you about it, and like what are your just general opinions to start us off?
I think it's for me. I think it's for me. I just kind of my upbringing. You know what I mean? Like I just kind of was in the social housing, and I just kind of got interested in why it could be better.
Yeah, for sure.
And then the benefits of it. So I feel like I actually have like firsthand experience from it too.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Branching off of that, I had a lot of friends who were in it growing up. So being someone who lived in a townhouse, I kind of just always questioned like the difference from my neighborhood to theirs, and you know all the ins and outs. Why certain people are more represented in those neighborhoods versus my own. You know.
For sure.
No, fair.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I know I've seen a lot of it in the States, and they're always closed off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
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 Oh, really?
Yeah, like it's like it's
Like
somewhere.
gated?
No, not gated like that. Like you go in, like it's. They put it in a way that it's dangerous,
Mm-hmm.
so you don't want to go in those sectors.
For sure.
You know, they always paint them as the other.
Mhm.
So
Well, yeah, that's kind of like
Well,
here in
that's the
Ottawa.
problem, yeah.
There's like a stigma, right? You
Yeah.
don't go in that neighborhood.
exactly,
Right? Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. So, I'm just going to start us off with our opinion on how it might relate to critical race theory. I know that's a big comparison that is often drawn to social housing. Obviously, we do know that generally social housing is typically more in line with the black community. There are more
would
people
agree.
of color
For sure.
generally living in social housing. So why do we think that might be?
I think that's just like a historical standpoint right there. Like, obviously, like history wasn't really good, right?
Yeah.
And then that shapes up their life and their future, which is we're living that right now. And they have the difficulties of obtaining what, say, like a white person has because they didn't go through that traumatic experience in history. But yeah, and that kind of just carries on as a burden for them. I would feel like, yeah.
For sure. Any
Definitely.
other thoughts? Or?
Struggle is easily passed down from generation to generation. So as you know, people have kids, it gets passed down on, and they kind of just get used to what they know, and it's hard to break out of that.
And they kind of just like stay within, like it's hard to get out of it. Once you're in it, it's hard to get out of it. And I feel like there could be more help on that.
Yeah, for sure.
It's also a modern way to oppress too. Like it's hidden.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll get to the next point here. Obviously, housing is a huge topic right now. It's very expensive. Obviously, as Canadians, we know what that's like. We live in a rather big city, so we know how expensive it can be. How do we think that has an impact on social housing? Because obviously, with so few people being able to afford a house these days, obviously that seems like it would tie into it for sure.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, well, there's definitely like a lot, like the waiting. There's a wait list for all these social housing, and people struggle to get in. Like from my experience, my mom struggled to get in, right? And that's definitely because like housing is so expensive, right? But that's kind of like different of why that is an issue. Like we haven't really indulged in that, but that can definitely impact on everyone's trying to get into social housing. So the wait times are just like outrageous.
Well, I'll kind of build off of that. I one of my main questions here was, what is the issue that today's generation may face with accessing social housing? Because that's kind of what you just spoke about, is actually getting in. So what challenges are people typically facing when trying to get in? Yeah.
It's also like I feel like it's just it gets backed up. Like the system and the lineup to get in gets backed up because now I've noticed that social housing has had like a class shift. So usually, like when I was born, years and years ago, the middle class was usually not within social housing, but now you find a good percentage of the middle class resorting to social housing as everything raises in price. Because like a 1-bedroom apartment can run you $1,500 a month
For sure.
versus like back 20 years ago, that was like for like a whole entire house, a 3-bedroom house.
Yeah, not even comparable.
Exactly. So
Yeah, I agree.
when prices rise exponentially, then it opens up the door to social housing for the middle class. And once upon a time, they just didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. And also, like, since housing is expensive, people like, and everything's expensive now. So, like, you have a choice between affording groceries or affording housing. And now, if you want to go to, like, if you can only afford those housing, one of those housing initiative programs, the problem is that too is increasing as well.
Yeah.
And so not everyone can afford both.
Uh-huh. For sure. So the following question here I've got is, I know you guys have a lot of research done on SRA. It's a housing initiative within the city.
Yep.
How does it differ from other housing initiatives we've seen? And like what might be the advantages, disadvantages, whatever your thoughts, whatever your findings are. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's many SRAs across Canada, but the main one that we researched on was the one in Vancouver.
I see.
And they only took in women who were drug users, right? And the whole problem with society is that you see someone on the street and like they're doing drugs, right? And some people think like you can't help them, right? But it's like, and you'll tell them like, yo, just quit or get a job. But like you can't do that if you're just living on the street, right? Sure. So the SRA accommodates them, and they try to give them like just a tiny housing, like nothing great, but just something that they can like establish themselves and have that ontological security. And then
For sure.
that can get them like going, and hopefully then society can like start pushing them to like, okay, now you can get a job because you have that place to stay instead of, oh, where am I sleeping tonight?
Yeah,
right?
get them back on their feet.
However, the problem with single room accommodations or all of that, it's as much as it's a good base to start, I mean, to continue in your life and whatnot, that there's a lack of security because there's a lot of in and out, and it's ultimately it's not yours, you know. So
Yeah.
without it being yours, you're still feeling like distanced.
Yeah, well, I'll build
A
off that,
disconnect,
actually,
yeah.
because I was also very curious about how SRA contributes to crime, and like if we think it contributes more to crime or it helps prevent it. So like what your kind of thoughts are as it kind of relates to that.
Yeah, I just feel like housing in general and the housing crisis reflects crime a lot. Like,
Oh yeah,
I lost
like
my train
so.
of thought.
That's okay.
Like so with a lot of these social housing, so not just SRAs, but what happens is the environment is so like poor, right? It kind of like you kind of just build the social housing and then you just leave it and then see how it plays out, which is not the approach that it should be, which can then cause like just an environment that, oh, okay, like it's okay to do crime, I guess, because like the whole thing is just not good. Like the environment's not good. It's like the broken windows theory. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Yeah.
Of
But
course.
yeah, it's like if a window's broken, doesn't get fixed, okay, let's just break another one, right? So it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, that's definitely a big aspect, just the lack of maintenance, I would say. Which-
Yeah, exactly. And also what you just said, that concept is in the article from the Société de Développement de Montréal, the public initiatives in housing, they said that one of their dominant issues and what they notice is that people who live in these housing programs that are upkept, that they have like security, if they need fresh paint, they live better, they're more secure, there's less crime, whereas somewhere where it's neglected. So places that are neglected by people who own these housing, it reinforces crime too. So again, the broken windows.
Yeah, well, I actually had a question also kind of relating to that. It's good we're kind of building into my next question here
Yep.
about how like societal connections or environmental connections, which you were just mentioning, like neglected neighborhoods, which we just spoke about, how might that contribute to crime, and how like that kind of relates to social housing?
Yeah, that's kind of going back to the answer of just not caring. So why should I care, right? If I'm in the social housing, but to fix that, that's kind of just more on who builds it and like your leader, right? So it depends. Like it's definitely a tricky situation, but there are actual social housing that have tried to do this maintenance, like keep up with the maintenance and keep up with like surveillance and security, and that's the CPTED one, which is the crime prevention through environmental safety, and that's where they actually have like a security guards, surveillance, people watching the surveillance, janitors always just making sure everything's good, and statistically, they actually have shown that crime is a lot lower in those neighborhoods, but they definitely could do even better. But yeah, that's
I feel like those efforts really branch off from like the one and done effort that I feel like is adapted by these housing corporations. Like these corporations are funded by the municipality, like the city of Ottawa, and then they kind of adopt the motto of like, all right, we've given you basically an adaptation to your circumstances. Now you're on your own.
I see.
But I feel like as time goes on and crime keeps occurring in these communities, the city is slowly realizing that this one and done motto is not necessarily good, and it needs constant
because
protection.
Because housing programs are usually short term.
Yeah.
And so if we're always like neglecting them and whatnot, everything in regards to like, for example, crime rate, whatever, it's never going to, how do I say this, better itself. It's always like short term, I guess you could say.
Like fixes.
Yeah, exactly. Fixes to a problem that's been ongoing for a very long time. And what promoted us to talk about it more, I guess, obviously COVID made us realize a lot of things. And I'm not saying because of COVID now we're realizing it, because it's always been an issue, but I think it really helped us have this as a subject.
Yeah, awesome. Just to close it up, I think this is kind of what most people would be wondering is what do we think the fixes are? Like, what is the solution? How can we better social housing to make it more accessible for people or more safe? Because that's obviously a big concern that we just talked about.
I think it's, again, it could be very, like a solution could be very community-based. So if we all care for our housing, our environment, that could definitely help in regards to like the crime rates. And also that sense of community increases sense of security, even somewhere that's so short-term. And sometimes that's not short-term though, but I've read that, like this SRA, it's only for like a certain amount of time in certain provinces. So I don't know, just reinforcing that security and
that's true. Many eyes will see all crime. Like if you have a lot of people on the lookout in your community, and like everyone's paying attention, everyone's kind of having the community's best interest at heart, we'll definitely get to the bottom of, or the root cause of all this.
Yeah, because housing initiatives are not bad.
No,
they're not.
No. Yeah,
they're a place to live.
They're a
no,
necessity.
honestly,
because for some people it's either that or the streets.
Yes, 100%.
Like,
And if we're painting them as bad, then we think it's bad, then we don't invest more money in it or time in it.
100%.
My workaround is kind of a little different. Like I kind of, I kind of think it's more like it could be a mindset thing, right? Like if you go into social housing, like, and it's all like the environment is bad, then you'll probably turn out to be
that's true
with that environment. But how I think of it is like with the new houses being built, right? Like say a company like Mattamy Homes, like the government tells Mattamy Homes, okay, you have to build in your new neighborhood that you're building. Say there's 10 houses, you have to build one that's a social housing. All right, so that they go in right to that social housing, and then they have the mindset of everyone else who cares for their home, right? So they're not in that environment right away.
It's like a normal community.
Yeah.
As opposed to
But it is. But the thing is, it is normal, right?
Yeah,
the housing,
for sure.
So normalizing
And then
it.
you can like people can say like, oh well, how do you choose people to go into that? But it's like you could do like, oh, people who are in a regular social housing, say you monitor them and they're actually like they're working, you see an increase in their salary or something like that. They have family and they're not using drugs anymore. Then you can move them into there. You can have background checks, and then you can keep up on like daily or like monthly checkups. Okay, how are you doing? And then a year, okay, how is everything? Can you move out, or do you need to stay, or are you bad? You know, do you have to get out of here and someone else who's working for it, right? So it can kind of be like that, which I think is kind of interesting. And then there's the issue of like, oh, what about the neighbors? What if they just like oppress that one house, right? But no, like you can't. You can't really.
It's hard to do.
Yeah,
you have to go out of your way to do that.
Yeah, it's hard. I feel like it's hard to think that, and like
Keep it
you
anonymous
don't have
to
to
an
make
extent.
it.
That's true.
You don't have to make it like a really bad house. Like it can
Yeah.
be the same house, like same, just a townhouse, right? That's
Exactly.
just made for them. You don't have to tell anyone. Like that's just how it is. And then if they know, they know. But yeah, I feel like I don't really think anyone has ever done that. So.
No, for sure.
Good idea. Yeah.
Awesome, guys. Well, I appreciate your time. I think we've had a pretty successful discussion here talking about social housing. Just thank you guys for coming. I really appreciate
Thanks
it.
for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Awesome, guys.
All right.
See you later.
See
Take
ya.
care.
Bye.